we could end up with a planet that's more fit for Mad Max than for ordinary people.
Really obvious to most people, I think, that the Tories have to be consigned to the dustbin of history. They should never be allowed back into power again after their performance the last few years. So they're quite easy to dismiss, and hopefully the electorate will do that too. But Labour seem to be too scared, don't they, to implement a just transition for fear that they're going to get punished by the market.
Hi, today I'm with John Adams, candidate for Telford, and Pat McCarthy, candidate for the Wrekin. And it's in the middle of conference season, so we thought we'd discuss in our first Green Chat some issues that have got us talking lately. Pat, would you like to go first?
Yeah, why not? I'm particularly interested in the sort of issues that aren't being discussed and why they're not being discussed. I did an article, a letter in the local press. Action needed to halt the madness, and this refers to the green light that was given for the extraction of 300 million barrels of oil and gas in the Rosebank oil and gas fields. This was never really discussed, mainly, in my view, because both parties are accepting that our needs and the needs of the planet are going to come second to the needs of multinational companies and legacy industries. So I think that's the reason that it's not part of the party conferences, because there is a unified political consensus on that. So my article here was difficult to get in. It took 3 weeks, and me contacting them twice, asking them why they haven't put the article in. And at the end, they've edited a bit out, which makes it look as if I'm just making assertions about the Labour Party's adherence to the position, the line that the Tories have taken over this investment. So they're saying that they're going to honour this agreement to extract all these barrels of oil and gas from this field. They've said they're going to continue with that because they don't want to disrupt the economic situation that they find themselves in. They are defining themselves as the grown-ups. I define them as people that are going to continue with this ecocide and destroy my children's future. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, well, the first thing that strikes me about it is that the Labour Party, evidently, from that honouring that agreement, they evidently just don't get the science and the physics of what's going on with the climate and what needs to be done. Other institutions globally certainly do, the International Energy Agency and so on, all saying that no new oil and gas can be developed because we've already got reserves which are too much for the planet to bear anyway. So as you say, most of those will have to be left in the ground at the end of the day, and we need to transition to cleaner energy systems. Yeah. So that's the first thing, but I think on top of that there are other fundamental reasons why the Labour Party are not the party to get too excited about, because climate being the most important issue that everything else policy-wise should be based around addressing, doesn't seem like that's going to be the case for the Labour Party. They've chosen not to do things which are essential to addressing the climate crisis and taking us forward to a hopeful and healthier future. As you know, that most of the membership of the Labour Party is actually in favour of a fair voting system so that everybody's vote can count equally, and produce a government that will work more in the national interest, a more collaborative kind of government that would do that. So you need to have a fair voting system like proportional representation, and the Labour leadership seems adamant that that's not something that they're prepared to contemplate. Certainly not at this point in history, and that's the issue, is that we just don't have time to wait to do these things. We need to do them now. So voting for Labour, if they're not going to introduce proportional representation, seems like a very good reason not to me. That's one thing. Another thing they won't do, they've said, and again, another thing that's essential to addressing the climate crisis, is that we need to have a fair taxation system that taxes wealth, for example, on the same basis that income is taxed, and introduce other wealth taxes, carbon taxes, and so on, so that we can actually put a lid on the emissions and keep it under control.
I think you've made some really great points there. Now, it seems to me that in general, politics has been skewed not to represent our needs and the needs of the planet and where we need to get to, say, in 30 years' time. Because in 30 years' time, if we go along the trajectory that's been planned for us by our political masters, then we could end up with a planet that's more fit for Mad Max than for ordinary people.
Yeah.
So we need to look at what's needed to get to a sustainable lifestyle and planet, so that our needs are integrated with the capacity for our planet to sustain those needs. So that should be what we're planning to get to, and we need to start operating that plan from today, or from yesterday actually, but from today. We need to look to where we need to get to and start planning now. And certainly things like expanding our capacity to exploit more oil and gas, when we've got to keep 60% of the reserves that have already been exploited in the ground, is madness, is total madness, because we're expanding the capacity when we've been told that if we're to keep to 1.5 degrees of heating only, then we need to keep 60% of those reserves in the ground and not exploit them. So we've got a political leadership that is looking towards and planning for our own destruction.
Yeah, I mean, people are getting really worried about it, aren't they? And there's a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress people are feeling because they see this kind of, there's a phrase called cognitive dissonance, isn't there? That where you sort of act in a way that is totally counter to your interests, as it were, because there's just too much anxiety around that particular issue. And one thing in terms of climate anxiety, there was a really interesting comment that brought it home to me that I read the other day. Was a climate psychologist at Bath University, and she said, the very people who are supposed to be protecting you are the people who are hurting you. And not only are they hurting you, but they're telling you that they love you and they're doing it for your own good.
Yeah,
So,
that's absolutely right. So, I mean, we've got to decide as a community, as a nation, why we're allowing politicians to destroy our futures. And I think one of the barriers to that understanding is that they create the narrative, the constraints that they impose to limit our imagination, to limit our demands. So what they say is there's no alternative, or I call it the TINA.
Yeah.
The TINA proposition. There is no alternative, because what we're saying is we can't do any more taxation, without explaining why that's the truth, because it's clearly not. It was reckoned that the Green Party state that they can obtain, I think it's sort of 1.7 trillion pounds by taxing 2% of the wealthiest by 2%. So if they tax their wealth by 2%, which after all is a tiny amount of the total, then we can we can put 1.7 trillion pounds into our budgetary expenditures, and just think what we could do with that. It would transform the NHS, it would transform education, it would allow us to invest in and develop new technologies that could save us and save our future generations. To me, it's a no-brainer. But what they've done is they've limited our confidence. They've limited our confidence to make those demands by saying there's no alternative. There's no alternative to what we're saying.
Okay, do you think people will accept that some of, like that was Maggie Thatcher's favourite acronym, I think, Tina, wasn't it? But other things that she said as well, that were sort of fundamental statements about the way the world is now, and we're still kind of living the legacy of her policies, aren't we? I think many years after she's gone. But do you think people are sort of in a position to see that when she said things like there is no alternative, that she was actually wrong? Because look at the world, the state the world's in now, as a consequence of her policies.
But there is a consensus, isn't there? The Overton window, what's accepted as political reality is constrained by the main actors, the main political forces that are all agreeing with each other. So you have to be a very brave person to say, I know better, that they're actually trying to fool me. When
that's
everybody
reality,
around you, all the people that are supposed to be making decisions for your benefit are saying, or agreeing with each other and saying that there is no alternative, but to accept the status quo, or more or less the status quo, for now and in the future.
Yeah, but I think the transition that we're looking for really does require people to sort of go beyond, mentally, to go beyond what's been kind of crammed into people's heads for the last 40 years, and to see outside the box, basically.
And what you were talking about earlier, about the cognitive dissidence will increase as this narrative becomes so challenged by the realities of everybody else's experience. And when that becomes too unbearable, that's when the massive systemic changes will happen. People will just say, I no longer believe you. I no longer believe in this consensus.
But remember, time is the crucial issue here, isn't it? And we really just do not have years to spare on wasting another parliament like we've wasted the one that we're in at the moment. Because I remember thinking at the election count in 2019, we just haven't got time for this. When it became obvious that the landslide was going to go the Conservatives' way, it was shocking, really, thinking that we've got 4 years now that are going to be completely wasted in terms of dealing with the climate issue, and that's exactly what's happened in the last 4 years, isn't it?
But there's no political party, a major political party, that's actually acted as if we're in a crisis. So everybody's thinking, well, all these people like Just Stop Oil and XR and the Green Party that's saying all these things about emergencies and about how we've got to gear ourselves up to massive changes that aren't going to be harmful. And that's what people are always believe, because of what they're being told, that these dissident voices are going to bring us back into the Stone Age again. But actually, we're going to bring them into a better and sustainable future. That's what these voices are actually saying, and it's going to be a better future. It's going to be a better future from what people are experiencing now. But of course, it's not in the interests of those in power. So the plans that we have as a Green Party are all about conditioning society for that future, making the lifestyles appropriate to the resources that we have, but also making them or gearing those resources around the needs of people, the many, and not just the few. So that wealth isn't condensed to the 1-2% of our communities, but is delivered throughout, so that everybody can live a prosperous, but I mean a life worth living, not just in terms of material wealth. So there will be public wealth and private sufficiency.
Everybody could have access to things that at the moment only wealthy people can afford to have facilities, whether, you know, access to a swimming pool or a tennis court or all that in your local community.
But all those things, and people don't, because changes happen salami-like, we've ended up in a position where all the things that we used to experience and enjoy are now being sold back to us. So we're having to pay for them. So we're having to pay for things that 40 years ago that were delivered in the public sphere. I remember living in Telford, where there were so many activities and services that were provided by the community, by the council, that no longer exist. And to have those services, we have to pay for them.
That takes tax, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I want to go back to that. I want to go back, you know, that and that's not retro.
That.
Yeah, but back and forward, if you like. So go back to that idea that we live in a social. Society does exist, as Thatcher refused to acknowledge.
And it is not our job to glory in inequality, as Thatcher maintained.
Yes, that's right.
What did she say? It's our job to glory in inequality and see that talents and abilities are given vent and expression for the benefit of us all. She lied.
I'd like to ask people how we are going to survive when we're consuming twice the amount of resources that the planet can afford every year. Nobody's asking these questions. So if we're consuming twice as much as the Earth's budget allocation to our consumption, then obviously it means that we're running out of time to survive, because there'll be a point in which the Earth cannot resource our ecosystem anymore.
What would you say to people who are probably environmentalists, thinking about voting Green, who know and understand we need to oust the Conservative government because they're not taking environmental issues seriously, but it's becoming more and more clear that neither are Labour? How would the Green Party be different?
Well, I think that people generally need to be aware that the future, whatever way you look at it and whatever decisions are taken, is going to be radically different from what people are used to looking back into the past. So there is no business as usual option for us. There is radical change, whether that be allowing further Tory rule, which is going to see more environmental degradation, more social
disintegration.
Disintegration, indeed. And so on. A pretty nightmarish kind of future to look forward to under Tory rule. Or we can take a path that is different. We can reject 40 years of Thatcher policies and neoliberalism and so on and say, look what's happened to the world as a result of that. We need to change it. We need to do things radically differently and take the sustainable way forward, which is the Green programme.
Wouldn't you say that it's a philosophical difference, a fundamental philosophical difference? So the Green Party have a different value system. So we will value and we'll prioritise the needs of people and the planet's needs. And what exists at the moment is a system that prioritises the needs of a few percentages of the world's population, i.e. the rich and the wealthy, and not the 98% of the world's population. So it's a fundamental difference we have with the other parties.
Yeah, individual self-interest is out the window as far as we're concerned now. We need collective interest, don't we? We all need to work together in a common kind of purpose.
We hang separately or together, you know. That's the point. We cannot survive as individuals, and the whole narrative that we've been brought up to individualise our needs and not concern ourselves with our neighbours so much, and just express ourselves in the way the planet and communities can't afford that. We just cannot afford that. But that's not necessarily going to make our lives worse. In fact, I truly believe that becoming more aware of other people's needs gives us a better sense of who we are, because we are social animals.
Much more caring and sharing kind of paradigm is what we need, isn't it?
That's right.
Not just individual self-interest and
everyone benefits.
Beggar thy neighbour kind of thing. So yeah, because time, as you say, is so lacking, we don't have time to and ah about this. We need to make the right decisions really, really quickly. Then obviously you guys, the public, are going to have to make the right choice at this upcoming general election. And it should be fairly obvious to most people, I think, that the Tories have to be consigned to the dustbin of history. They should never be allowed back into power again after their performance the last few years. So they're quite easy to dismiss, and hopefully the electorate will do that too. But Labour seem to be too scared, don't they, to implement a just transition for fear that they're going to get punished by the market. So they're kind of very reluctant to take the kind of steps that are necessary to get us into a safe space. The Labour leadership as well is refusing to back PR, which is going to be essential to achieve that collaborative kind of government that will get us through that transition. So you're left with really a choice between the Liberal Democrats and the Greens. And the Liberal Democrats, unfortunately, are still refusing to impose additional taxes on the wealthy and to introduce a fair tax system. So really, the Green Party seems like your best bet to me.
The Green Party are the only party that have policies that deal with the future. The other parties have policies that are dealing with the past and the resources that we used to have, and the world and the planet used to have. We're no longer in that position, and we have to recognise that. We're the only party that has the guts to explain and accept that we can no longer go along in the fashion that we have done in the past.
And to stand up to existing structures of power in society and make those changes, because those institutions need to change as well if we're going to be sustainable. So, yeah. Vote Green, be nice. Not intending to compromise existence.